Okay, I'm going to run through all the effects that I've set up here. And I'm not going to actually play every single channel, otherwise this video would end up being hours long. Just going to run the odd sound through it just to give you an idea of the way I've structured each effect. There are two approaches to this. One is the old school approach of setting up reverbs, which is you set up a master reverb for the whole mix, whereby all the instruments or the majority of instruments will dip into. You then have a very specific drum reverb and a vocal reverb. So you end up with three types of reverbs that are used for the mix. This is the old school approach. Nowadays, we tend to take this many steps further because we can craft each reverb very specific to the sound. And we don't have to have every single sound sitting in its own space because certain sounds are already sitting in their own spaces just through other types of dynamic processing. The second approach is to actually use effects as inserts on the channel. Now, this is okay if you're customizing or creating a specific effect for that sound, and you're not going to use that effect on other sounds. However, if at any point you're going to have more than one sound access that specific reverb, it makes sense to set it up as an effects channel, an auxiliary, a send and return. And we do that because we're able to send multiple instruments and sounds to an effect by varying amounts. We can adjust how much of that sound we want to be affected by that effect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run through all the major effects that I've set up here. And I'd like to start off, first of all, with Decapitator. Now, this might seem crazy putting a distortion unit on an auxiliary channel, but I've done that because what I often do, and I do this a lot with vocals, is I'll send certain amounts of a vocal to a distortion unit just to give it that sort of cutting sound instead of using an equalizer. What I like about Decapitator is the fact that you can generate additional harmonics by using the drive here and the selected topology. Moderate amount of drive. My filtering is quite dramatic though, and I've tended to go slightly for the dark here. 100% wet, I'm not after a parallel mix, quite a lot on the output. So what you end up with is this sort of cutting type of sound, which really works well to bring vocals through a mix. Have a listen.
Ready for the show.
And this without it.
Oh, I'm ready for you, let's go. Ready for the show.
So it just makes it cut through a bit more. So I've left this on an auxiliary and I'm feeding different vocal tracks to it. Next up, I'm using Softtube's ZAR1. Now the reason I love this particular reverb is because it pretty much behaves like a lexicon, like the old lexicon PCM reverbs, the 80s, the 91s, etc. Yes, it's not exactly the same, but it's actually a damn good lexicon emulator. I'm using this for the master global reverb that a lot of instruments are going to access. This is the effect that denotes the space for the entire mix. So I've gone for a 50-50 on reverb early reflections because I wanted a more controlled sound. I didn't want this sort of overbearing wet reverb type of sound. Enough pre-delay so that whatever I send to it sounds clean. If I had the pre-delay at 0, we'd have the effect kick in straight away, which I didn't want. I wanted some of the dry signal to come through and then the reverb to grab it. Time, although it might seem like 4 seconds is a lot, there's filtering going on here that actually takes away from that. Density I've left on sparse because I don't want that really thick, dark reverb type of effect that you get when you push the density through. Next up is the TRS Hall, or rather it's IK Multimedia's classic studio reverb with the hall setting. So I'm using the dark piano hall, which I've edited quite extensively here. And really I did this because the plinky layers or any other type of synthy sounds I wanted to be fed to this reverb, but without it having this huge bright reverb type of texture. So have a listen to this. So you got that nice big roomy effect without it being washed in reverb. Of course, I'm exaggerating all my sends so that you can hear the effects quite clearly. Next up, Ozone's reverb, and I'm using the old Ozone 5. I didn't even go for the 9 or any of the modern ones because I quite like what this does. I've selected Hall, as you can see, decent amount of pre-delay here just to be able to get the dry element through. I've left early reflections on 0, so I've maxed that out because I was going for this sort of dry, up-close, personal type of sound. Decay time at 0.83, it came just right, but you can see it's mainly dry mixed with a little bit of the wet. So I'm using parallel here, but I'm making sure it's not too wet. And the sound I'm feeding to this is the gentle ARP build. So have a listen to this going through the reverb. So it's just enough to give it that sort of presence and slightly up close feel without it being washed in reverb. Next up, the PSP Spring Reverb Nexcellence. This takes spring reverbs to the next level because of the amount of control we have on this. I've loaded up a preset called Saturated Snare, and I've played around with all the different settings just to get the right type of color. I've really pushed this to give a spring effect, and the texture comes along quite dramatically. And to be honest, quite often with my drums, I prefer to send them to spring reverbs than your traditional rooms and plates, etc., etc. I'm not saying you have to do it every time. In certain scenarios, it works quite well. And I think I'm sending quite a few sounds to it, all drums. So I've got the extra drums, etc. But I'll just play the snare for you. So I've exaggerated so you can really hear that sort of wobbling effect of the spring. Next up, Black Hole, Eventide. Now, it would take me ages to explain how the whole thing behaves, but think of it as a reverb effect with acres of modulation that warps the sound. So what I'm going to do is play a sound that I've sent to this effect. Now, I created this specifically for the piano and a few other sounds, but I changed it halfway through. Again, it's an option for you if you've got Black Hole and you want to use it. So I've created two different effects for each sound just to be able to show you the difference between the two. So let's go here to the synth lead, and I created the Black Hole and the spring. So have a listen to it using the Black Hole. Although you can hear the reverb nicely in the background, the sound itself is very clean. It's a really, really good reverb mangling tool. You can create all manner of effects using that. Let me just play the same sound through the spring. You can hear that's a far more resonant and bigger sound. So the Black Hole worked out nicely. To be honest, I'd used it earlier on the piano and then I just changed my mind. I'll switch it on again just so as you can hear what it's doing to the piano, because it is quite a unique type of effect. Let me bring it down a bit so it's not too much. Just listen to the impact it has on this piano sound. You can hear that gorgeous lush reverb just hanging. I changed my mind eventually simply because I wanted something a little understated, not so strong and overpowering, but I've left it there because I'm using it on one or two other sounds. Abbey Road plates, gotta say, very good plugin. It behaves exactly the way a plate does. What I particularly love about it is I've got control over the plate itself. You've got 4 plates you can select from. The damper tool is the real weapon here, but you can create all manner of crazy effects, but I'm using it as a straightforward plate. And to be honest, I have quite a few sounds going through the plate. Let me play something different here. So we'll do the pipe hit, just to give ourselves some variety. So I've really structured this so that the sounds that are being sent to it just have an upfront type of texture about them, as opposed to this washed reverb effect. Next up, again, I've gone to IK Multimedia's classic plate, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It's a very good plate. I'm using wide vocals, which I've edited. I've gone for a very specific type of sound here, so have a listen to this. Let me switch all the others off so it doesn't interfere with what you're listening to. But you can tell all these sounds are being sent to that plate. So it's got this really nice kind of texture, a standard plate texture. I think plates are absolutely wonderful. I use them on vocals, I use them on all manner of sounds. And if you get a good plate algorithm going, it can save your mix. It really can. Echo Boy, to be honest, I use this in just about every one of my mixes. And I send a lot of sounds to delay units because I find delays are very expressive. Apart from creating delay throws on vocals, etc., which I think are really important in mix scenarios to clean vocals up. You don't want a delay playing continually through a vocal line. What I've done though is, and I might pick the vocal line here as an example, What I have done is to exaggerate it so you can hear how these delays are affecting the sound. The trick for me here is to have a difference between the left and the right delays. So for example, I've picked the quarter dotted here on the left, but just a quarter note on the right. That distinction gives that lovely wavering effect. So have a listen to this. Let me go and switch off all the others. We'll stay with the Vox doubles on this. Now, what I have done with the delay is to then send that, let's disengage that, to the ZAR1. The ZAR1 is the reverb I set up before, and I've covered it already, as the global reverb for the mix. So have a listen to how the Vox doubles sound going through the delay, which is then fed into the reverb.
Ready for the show. I'm ready for you. Let's go.
So it's given that spatial feel, some motion. I haven't created any delay throws on this. I just wanted you to hear the effect in full effect. And it sounds quite good, actually. I think it's worked out really, really well. The beauty of Echo Boy is the amount of editability it has. You can do anything with this delay unit. Finally, I'm using another delay here, which is the H delay, and I'm using this really as a straightforward quarter delay on certain things that I think would benefit from that type of a delay. So no variation left to right. This is what I refer to as a straight out of the box delay unit. Now, there are sounds I'm sending to it because I think it sounds quite good. Let's switch some of these off. Let's put on the lead vocal. Let's make sure everything else is switched off so nothing else is feeding into it. As you can see, I've got quite a few sounds that I've selected to be fed to the H delay. H delay itself is then also going to the ZAR1 global reverb. So have a listen to that.
Like I've been waiting for you.
So you can just hear literally like 2-3 repeats and that's it.
I've been waiting for you. 100,000 million hours. I've been paid like I've been.
So I really like that kind of quarter delay effect that it's having. It's just the odd repeat that sort of just drops down nice and quietly. It works really great on vocals, but as I say, I've got it on quite a few sounds. Okay, that's it in terms of all the effects that I've got here. You don't have to use all of them. You can stick to the traditional approach of the 3 global reverbs and a delay or 2. But I like to have variety, and I'm one of these producers that likes to mix different types of reverb textures together as opposed to having one homogeneous reverb that is used for every sound. Now, in terms of the global reverb, I want that for the whole mix because everything is going to sit in that space. If you try and have 3 or 4 global reverbs that are there to denote the space the mix sits in, it often ends up smearing and sounds quite cluttered. So my recommendation is for the global reverb. Remember, this is the one all instruments dip into to denote the space of the mix, not for color. All these other things I've set up are very specific. This one is purely to handle the space for all the instruments within the mix. So long as you stick to those rules, you'll never go wrong.